Hello once again and welcome to my beginner tutorial on how to create a Halo Custom Edition map. Today's lesson 2, all about shaders and materials and how to make your map look a lot better than it was before. You can continue using the map you made in lesson 1 or start fresh like we'll do right here. What I'm basically going to do is create a map with a bunch of materials and a bunch of textures just to show off the difference between them and what we can do in Gorilla to modify how they look. So what I'm going to do to start here is start with a simple box like last time. I'm going to make it a cube just cuz. I'm going to make it pretty big. And just like before, I always like to start with getting some sort of size reference. So we're going to take our Master Chief model, make sure the level's pretty big, and adjust it as such. That's plenty big. Okay. Now if we look at wireframe mode here, we can see that just like a cube, it's going to have 6 faces that we can apply textures to. But we're going to want a little bit more than that. So we're going to click here, go to modify, make sure only the cube is selected. And we're going to change these length, width, and height segments to something a bit more. So we're just going to add a bunch of squares here and go ahead and give us a little height. Now we can get out of wireframe mode, right click, convert to editable mesh, select Polygon, and select all of these, flip them just like before, just like we're making a normal map, a normal box map. But the difference is when we click on the walls here, ignore back facing, we click on the walls here, and instead of the entire wall being selected like before, we have these little squares that we just created in the wireframe. So that's what we're going to use to create a bunch of different textures. Before we continue, I'm going to name my box many textures, and I'm going to create our frame. I'm going to link the two. There we go. Go back into modify, Polygon, and we're just going to start by selecting all, Control A, and setting them all to the same ID. That way we don't have to select every individual block. Now, unlike our last map, I want walls in this one. So I'm going to select all the bottom ones here. And take off ignore back facing, so I select everything. And I'm going to go into wireframe mode again. You can also press F3 to quickly switch between the two. And I'm going to select all of these faces throughout the entire box. And I'm going to change these to ID 2. So now if you click on these squares, you'll see the top square here is 1, right underneath is 2, and everything underneath is 2. Now I did that because what we're going to do now is open the material editor, click on standard here, change it to multi-sub object just like we did in lesson 1. And we're going to use a lot of textures. Let's see about how many we'll need. We have the walls, we'll go ahead and make all the same texture, but we also want the sky, so that's 2. And then we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grid. So that means we're going to want 32 textures. We're going to change this name to something that's meaningful. I'm going to scroll up and we're going to go ahead and start adding to this. The first thing we're always going to start with is plus sky. something to give us a little reference. We're going to make this light blue so we know it's there. We're also going to name it here. Now when we apply it to our object here, out of wireframe mode, and also in create, so that it applies to the whole object, we'll see that all the faces we put 1 on are now blue. Because, like I said before in lesson 1, this ID here corresponds to the texture ID that we applied to that face. And you can see it even shows the name. So with that in mind, we can now start texturing everything else. I'm going to go ahead and leave ignore backfacing off, but go into wireframe mode so that I can see everything that's going on, everything that I'm selecting. Oh, leave it off, I mean. So now you can see all the walls are selected, just the walls. We're going to change these to 2, which we already had. We're going to call these walls and also make this standard. I'm going to call these walls. Go ahead and change this color to whatever you want. We'll be changing it again very soon. And now I'm just going to make a bunch of textures. For your map, go ahead and set the number of textures and the names and all of this kind of stuff to whatever you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and go up to 10 for now, actually. Or the minimum, let's go to 24. Because I'm going to show off a bunch of textures later on, a bunch of shader effects. This will go ahead and let me know in here what all these textures are very fast, so that's why I'm going through and naming all of them. And there we go. So for A, let's go ahead and start selecting these. Let's make this A, B, and so on. So what we have here now is a bunch of squares we've applied different textures to. I only did 24 because there's only about 24 or 25 different shaders, and one of them is actually water, another one's actually glass. So some of these won't really look quite right, but I just wanted to make sure I had enough. You, of course, can do whatever is appropriate for your project. What we're going to move on to now is for every texture you add here, you're going to click that none, or in this case material, depending on how it ended up adding. When I added more, it just filled this in. Name it something appropriate. I'm just going to stick with A because I have so many textures and they don't really matter what I name them right now. And instead of changing the diffuse color, you're going to go to this little blank square right next to it. And you're going to go to bitmap. Now bitmap tells everything that you're using a picture for the texture here. Now we don't have a picture right now, so when we select it, there's not going to be anything we can pick. We can pick something like that was built in the 3D Studio Max just to show you. See. And always remember to click this Show Shaded Material in Viewport so that you can see your texture. But we don't really want that. We want something that we made ourselves.